do a quick intro. My name is Kate White. I run the business intelligence team for what is now, when I made this presentation, was Pinnacle Entertainment, and as of last week we merged, so now I work for Penn National Gaming. So we'll get into that and what that means. So you'll see some updates to my presentation over the last few days because it's been kind of hectic. Today we're going to talk about permissioning and what we've done to basically automate as much as we can in a very simplistic way. So let's get started. So generally we're going to talk about these items. Challenges with manual permissions. I'm sure everybody's got that, but we're talking about Tableau Server. So how do we grant individuals at my company access to things that they need to see every single day? Different pieces of content, and we've matured over time. So there's lots and lots of content with different needs and different permission structures. And then planning for automation. How do I not have to waste an FTE full-time to manage these permissions? How do we fix that? Solving governance. So in this example, we use SQL and Tableau only. So I'm not doing anything crazy. So we'll get into that. And then maintenance and oversight. What do we do today once that's been set up? How does it flow automatically going forward? What does it look like in terms of watching for capacity and such like that? And then kind of what happened and how it worked out well. So, who is Pinnacle Entertainment? What is Penn National Gaming? So I'm just going to say Penn National from now on. So we are the largest US regional gaming operator, which basically means I have 40 casinos now across the US. There's one right across the river here. Boomtown, New Orleans is one of our properties. Really nice if you haven't been there. Along with that, we manage from 16,000 to 30,000 employees. Hotel rooms, restaurants, table games, and over 50,000 slot machines. So I have data from everywhere, which is really fun. So along with that, we operate basically 5 billion annual revenue. So it's quite a big business, a lot of analytics that goes into what that does. So we really started, it's because the chart would go back before this, but in 2014, we had a big initiative to move a bunch to a single serve platform, and that included Tableau Server. So over time, the general idea was to go through these milestones. The first milestone was to get our EDW up and running. To be completely honest, we operate 25 different types of platforms at each casino. They could be different. So our EDW is pivotal in getting that clean data, having it all available, and being able to point Tableau at it really easily. So huge for us. Second, it was, okay, now we have all this clean data, let's go build some dashboards. So you can see over time, this is the number of views, that's the average number of workbooks we had, and this is still back to 2017, so this would go even higher today. And then active users. So we started adding pretty exponentially as we started adding more and more data. Good news and bad news. So we private labeled our Tableau server into its own self-service portal called the Enterprise Analytics Portal. At that point, we had over 10 different subject areas. And then today, we operate at the top, which I like to call the self-service. Everybody likes the holy grail. We manage over 20 different types of content across 450 dashboards. So it's pretty large compared to where we were starting a couple years back. So kind of gives you an idea of how we've grown. Number one reason we're doing that is, okay, great, we've got all this stuff and it's working really well. How is my BI manager now, his full-time job is trying to get people permissions to this, right? So today we have about 4,000 active users, obviously not concurrent, across a lot of different things. So managing that became almost impossible for a small team. We only operate a team of 6. So with that, we said, we got to come up with a better plan. So we sat down and we came up with, oh wait, let's go back. Let's talk about all the challenges. I'm sure most of you know these, but let's review them just in case, right? So number one, onboarding new employees was almost impossible. You'd have someone come in and say, I don't know what I need access to. Just give me everything. I heard that 20 times a day. We're not going to do that. The second issue, we'd have a lot of promotions and transfers and different things going on. We operate a lot of different properties. They could even be switching in between properties. To keep track of that was impossible. So you were an analyst today, now you're a supervisor, then you're a manager, and all those have different roles. So for us to manage that, I'd have to know everybody and what they do every day, and that was not working. Access definitions undefined, leading to sensitive content. Great example, we have all of our financials in Tableau, which is awesome because we can correlate that to labor, our food and beverage sales, a lot of different stuff, but all of a sudden I'd have the bellman at one of my properties have access to my EBITDA margins, which I don't want. So that was because we were not managing it appropriately and we weren't tracking that. Next we have AD organizational and Tableau. So we use single sign-on environment, but we had different groups over here. We'd have Tableau, unique groups, local groups over here. It was chaos. So we had to kind of restart from scratch. We were also tracking everything through email. Worst idea ever. You can just imagine that was, I'm not even going to it. Then the last thing was is as we started to grow more and more, it took more and more resources to do this, which took away from my roadmap. So I was making promises that I couldn't sign because my resources were too busy granting permissions all the time. Huge, not good to, write the checks you can't do. So what did we do? So we sat down and said, let's figure it out, and did a feasibility discovery. So the first thing we did was say, we have to be able to have controllable content. So we went in, and I'm gonna go into detail of each one of these. We went in and we defined groups. And these groups are gonna be based off business area content. So with 450 dashboards across 25 things, let's define kind of what those groups look like and who need access to them. Then we created a matrix. The matrix is not as complicated as it sounds. It is an honest to God, true false mapping for the correlation between each group and each person. So you just sit down and say, should this person have access to this? Okay, yes, so get to that. Then we gathered all the data. That's where I'm gonna get into most of the meat, and it's a little technical. But we'll talk about where did I pull a bunch of stuff from to automate everything. Then we wrote out a solution. The solution is essentially just a SQL script that pulls from all these places. We run a daily job, and then it outputs a table that I can then surface in Tableau. So I can give everybody access to who should have access to what all the time. It's kind of awesome. We set up automation, so we're basically running this every day. You can run it multiple times a day, you could run it however you want to, but for us once a day was plenty. And then self-service. So this is where I went out and said, we have this great new tool, let's train people how to use it and start using it. So let's get into the details of each one, okay? I will get a tad technical in some areas, so I'll try not to get too crazy because everybody could use their own types of tools for this, just to clarify, right? So we use SQL because we're a SQL shop. You could use anything that you want to. So tread lightly on me, okay? So first thing we did, we met with IT and we went through and we said, okay, we use AD. We need to know everything there is from AD, including who is this person, what do they do, where do they work, what physical location do they work at, what's their title, and what's their login, right? Because that's the one connector between AD and Tableau. With single sign-on, I knew I had an AD login in Postgres from Tableau, and I had an AD login in my Active Directory to match that up. So that was the first thing. Can we do that? Do we have all the fields that we need? So we went in and we said, what's the current groups? Because we're gonna have to really clean up what we have going on right now, right? And redefine those. Then we met with stakeholders to kind of put this together. We could, with 450 dashboards, we could have 450 groups. Do we need 450 groups? Probably not. So let's start to functionally put together some of that content into areas so that we can say, okay, someone in finance may need the same information as somebody in accounting, as Rev Audit. So a lot of different groups, but they still needed the same information. So we did a lot of that. Then we drafted this matrix. And this matrix is my baby, so I'll give you a look at that. And then we went back and we got executive leaders to review and buy in. This was huge for me. We needed to use resources from help desk, IT, different areas to sustain this. So not having buy-in doesn't work. You can build something that's awesome, but if they're not gonna support it and push it out, then it's really not gonna work. So that was a big piece for us. So next, after the feasibility, we decided we're good to go. We went to define these content groups. So in this case, we're talking about what are the considerations we need to take into? Who owns the data in this area? Who do they think should have access to what, right? So in this case, my gaming operations manager needs to tell me who he thinks needs access to things. I don't know, right? So really defining with my stakeholders, working on sensitivity, again, like I said, financial information, all that. Shared data sets, huge, right? Like if you're using the same set, why do you need 4 different groups for that? It's usually the same kind of content. If I can see financials in one place, I can see financials everywhere. And then the last one is navigational simplicity. This was huge for us because we had folders everywhere and content everywhere, and it was very hard in terms of kind of blocking together the access pieces if your content's spread everywhere and it doesn't really relate to one another. So we knew we were going to do a total rehaul. So along with that, we went and got out the department organizational structure. So again, at the time it was about 15,000 employees, and we said, okay, this department is actually this, and it, I didn't know what the captain's group does or the engineering group that manages the boat. I mean, I don't know what that is. So we sat down and we kind of defined all of that, so we knew what are the types of things that they're going to need access to. Then we made these super groups, and this was big for us because there's certain people that they really do need access to everything, right? So our P&A group is a great example of that. They touch everything, and they manage and facilitate whatever is necessary for our GMs and different folks. So they needed a super group, and we didn't take that into consideration the first time, so I'm putting it up here so that you guys do that. And then the last one is this idea of scope groups. So I'll get into a little bit more detail, but we operate a corporate facility along with these 40 properties. And a lot of the people at corporate need access to see all the information from all those 40 properties, whereas the people at property only need to see themselves. So we use case logic in our data source filters to do that, using is member of groups. So I'll get into the details of that, but we basically define, Tom here, he can see everything because he works at corporate and he should. But Yamil, he's only supposed to see his own thing, so his own property, if maybe he works here in New Orleans. So we use a filter on every data source to define that and only show them in the filters what they're available to choose from. So we get away from that idea that you shouldn't see what you're not supposed to. Okay? Again, we'll get into how we did that. Okay, so this is the matrix. This is Excel. So this is where it started. It's that simple, right? We said, here's the content groups up top, right? So these are our business units. We decided that accounting, finance, and legal, really they need access to the same stuff. So put them all in a single group. And then we said, HR is a little bit different than workforce, which is a little bit different, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's this entire group of people that I don't know what they do. So they got their own group. So we said, here's the type of people, the type of information. So player summary is huge for us. I work in gaming, right? What do? We track players all the time. So player summary is a level of granularity of the dashboards they could see. If you go into my portal, which I'll show you in a second, there's a folder and it says players, right? And then you can either see player summary or player detail. If I show you player detail information, you could say, okay, I know that he came to gamble, he spent this much. I don't want everybody to have that. Sometimes I just want them to be able to see the summary level information. So we defined all of that as necessary that way. And then went through each level and defined who should have access to it. So if you're blue, that means you can only see your own stuff. So you can only see your property. If you're X, that means you can see the whole corporate enterprise. You can see every property's information. And if you're gray, that means you don't get anything. You're not supposed to see that. So we went through this and went through it with the executive team and defined all this in and got this leadership buy-in. As soon as we got the leadership buy-in, everybody agreed, we're gonna move forward with this, we're gonna automate this. You can't change it, okay? So we automated it, and I built out this very simple, this is what I was saying, bitmap, true, false. That's as simple as it gets. If you work at corporate and you're in accounting and you're a vice president, yes, you can see this, no, you don't see that. Super, super, super simple. Built this into a SQL table off of the Excel document. So I have a table now, and all it's got is the combination sets, the areas at the top, and a yes-no flag for all these definitions. So, what do we do now? We know what everybody's supposed to have access to. I went in and I say, so we're gonna give them more of the meat, right? Now we know, here's our matrix, let's go get our employees. So we need to know who they are, where they work, what's their department, and what's their position. So luckily, we have a very nice EDW. It has all of that information in it. If you don't, I'm sorry for you, because mine's awesome. But I can literally go pull that from a table in my EDW. So in the case that you need to keep that somewhere else or offline or et cetera, you can just join that in as necessary. But again, the join is that AD login back to what's in Tableau. Then I go out and I'm going to Postgres, and I'm pulling back all of the information in Postgres about what groups each person is currently in. So in Tableau, there's a pretty table that you can go query that says, you know, Brian's in these 5 groups right now. So I pull all that back and I get all those active groups. And then the last thing I do is I go back out to my matrix where I've defined who has access to what, and I join all those back together in a table. So let's look at it. So the screenshots are just for like general SQL nerds, don't get too crazy about it. But the idea is I'm loading the employee information into a team member detail. So I'm saying, this is my employee, this is all the information I know about them. Then I'm going out and I'm getting all the current permissions. I'm pulling those back as well. And then I'm going out and I'm putting all that and I'm pivoting it into a table to say how does that work? Lay it all out. What does the land look like right now in terms of who has access to what? So at this point we're starting to get, here's the employees, here's what they currently have. The next thing I'm doing is I'm going and I'm saying, load this idea of proposed or exception permissions. And I'm using a very simple case statement. If you belong in these groups, or if you're currently in these groups, you're active. If you're in this group and your bit flag says you're not supposed to be, you're an exception. And lastly, if you're in there and your bit flag says yes, then you're proposed for that group. So super simple, laying out these 3 different areas, and then we're tossing all that back into one table. So a little bit technical, but remember, employees, Postgres, and then this matrix rules back into one data set. And it gives us this. So this is every single employee, their position, which I got from the employee records, the property that they work at. So in this case, the property AD, that's where we say you have to belong to multiple groups. If you belong to the player group, great, but you also could belong to a property group so that I can run that case statement on my data source filter to say, which property should you see? Should you see all of them or just your own? So I need to know which property you belong to. So it's a combination of the 2 groups. But really the idea here is you can pull up an individual and say, are they active in these groups? Are they an exception to this rule because their bit flag says they're not supposed to have it, but they have it based on what Postgres says? And then a propose. So the propose is for usually new employees or changes that come in. It'll automatically load them in and say propose across the board for whatever groups they need. So the whole idea was just getting this one dashboard, right? My help desk comes in here and they can say, oh, look, Joe Blow said I need access to da-da-da. I just go type in, I can put in his AD login, I can put in his name, and it tells me exactly what he should have access to. I don't have to ask me or anyone else on my team. I don't have to send emails. I don't have to do anything. So this was pivotal in terms of managing those, at the time, 5,400 users. So along with that, we tell them a little bit about it, right? So in the case that we're in there and we say, hey, Joe needs access to this. Joe says, I need access to this. And then we say, oh, Joe, you're a barbershop attendant. You don't need access to that. Tell me why you need access to that for your job. So a lot of that was to help answer why certain people may not be proposed for groups. Again, once we built this out, we gave it to help desk and said, here you go. And they've handled most of it from here, which has been awesome. The next thing that we said was, okay, this is really great, but it's not catching or doing anything functionally, right? So we made a very simple subscription that goes in every day, and it picks up anybody that's proposed. And it says, shoot off a subscription every day to my help desk with everybody that's proposed. And we have a really quick, back before we had extensions, a really quick, super easy CSV. They run a job right on top of it, and it adds everybody to the groups that are listed. So I do not need to send anybody anything. This sets up, it runs every single day at 10:30, emails over, everybody gets added. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the 80 groups sync, magically they have access and nobody had to tell me anything. But they only have access to what they should have access to, so that's good. So generally this part right here has been great. There's, obviously there's some little bit you have to do to get into AD and working with your help desk teams. Hopefully you have nice ones like I did. But this will pick up anybody brand new, all those transfers, all those promotions, everything going on in this by flagging that proposed group. That's it. That's as simple as it is. So, what's next? Now we got all this stuff running, right? Which is awesome. We started to see that it was really great. We're getting a lot more usage, but performance could be a problem. What could be a problem? So let's go. You have to look at your usage. If you're not sitting down, inputting all the people and knowing what they have access to, you're not really seeing a lot in terms of the usage, what people are using, how they're using it, why they're using it, right? So for us, we started setting up a lot more monitoring. So I need to know, of my 4,000 users, what's my concurrency, right? That's huge, because if you're not watching that, you could blow everything up by just giving everybody access to everything. So concurrency, huge. There's an exception process, right? So in my organization, if you're in IT, you have 2 logins for everything, your regular login and your admin login. And we have these admin logins being proposed for everything. And it was like, no, we don't want that. So there's always gonna be tweaking and exceptions. Those super users is another example of that, where you're always gonna have people that might actually need access to everything, and you kind of have to build that out and what that means. And then last, we add stuff all the time. So you have to go back to the matrix. Great example, we had a huge project to bring in all of our workforce planning data. So we have Chronos and scheduling tools and all kinds of things, but we had to go back to the matrix to say who should have access to this, set it up, add it into the scripting, add it into all the logic, and then add it to the dashboard, and bam. There you go. Now you're proposing for all your brand new data and content that you don't have to explain a whole lot about. So there is some bit of it. The performance is the last piece. Again, huge for us because we keep ourselves to a pretty low threshold range that we tell people we're gonna come back with our dashboards in 3 seconds or less. You can't do that if you have 100 concurrent users hitting the same thing, right? So don't promise something. You have to be watching that regularly. And there's some really good performance sessions if you haven't been to them. They're awesome. So generally, that's what we do. So wrap it up. What did this do? This automated all of our onboarding for our new team members. All the hiring managers don't have to tell me anymore what they need access to or what they think they need access to. There's no more Excel. We had this really heinous Excel document. I would get an attachment that says which groups they should have. Oh my God, I don't even have to see that thing anymore. It's amazing. Predefined access roles, so we don't have to worry about that sensitivity any longer. So I feel safe that my CFO, I can tell my CFO, nobody can see the finances that shouldn't. Right? And if they do, I have another process that watches that. So that exception process, right? If you're an exception, I can set up another dashboard that says, send out an alert every single time you see a group of people that have exception access that they shouldn't. So again, you can watch it because you have that flag and that daily update. Daily provisioning process, so it's like a 4-hour window now. It's amazing. It doesn't take 5 days or 10 days or whatever to set up a new person. It's automatic. Transfers and promotions, automatic. Amazing. 30,000 people is going to be crazy. My user set's going from 5,000 to 10,000 in like 2 weeks. So I got to figure out how we're going to maintain that. Now I don't have to worry about it, right? Self-service matrix is huge for the help desk agents to be able to facilitate everything on their own. So they very rarely reach out to me. And if they do, it's because they don't like the color or something. I mean, it's that dumb, right? And then number one huge for me, 90% reduction in what my team did in terms of oversight. So now my resources that were doing this all day long are now working on real projects and making new content and doing their real jobs. So that's really nice. So that is how we did it. I'm sure there's 1,000 other ways you could do it more awesome than that, but that's how we did it, and it was super successful. And enjoy yourselves. I'm supposed to tell you there's a survey. I'm supposed to tell you a bunch of stuff. There's my email. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I can for sure give you the code base even that we use, whatever you want. The dashboards, whatever you need. So just hit me up, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your conference. Yeah. Yes, sir.